What's up, everybody? It's Marco from LusoOverland.com, your home for Mitsubishi Montero parts and accessories. And in this video, I'm going to go over everything on my own personal third generation Montero build. That's Yoshi, a 2005 Mitsubishi Montero Limited. And I often get questions. You guys want to know what I've done to my own personal Overland rig. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to cover the outside, the inside, everything that I've done. Stay tuned. All right, starting up front with the bumper, this is an ARB winch bumper, and it's I forget their names. They have like Safari and I think Savannah. I can't remember the exact names, but it's the one, of course, with the hoops around. You can get one where it's just flat on the top, but since I live where there's deer and elk, I wanted the one with the hoops. And it's a heavy bumper. It weighs 110 pounds by itself. So if you're gonna get this bumper, that's obviously going to necessitate that you take that into account on your front suspension. You'll need HD springs for that, but we'll get to that later. There's not a lot of choices when it comes to third generation aftermarket bumpers. You've got ARB, and then you've got random Chinese ones on like eBay. And those ones I can't recommend. I've owned them before. I've test fitted them. It takes just too much cutting that I'm comfortable with. You have to cut your frame, and they cause some overheating issues as well with the design of their light bar mount. So I can't recommend those ones. If you want an off-the-shelf steel bumper, it really is ARB. And then, of course, there's custom fabrication, which several other guys have done as well. Moving on to the side, you can see that I've got rock sliders. Now, these ones were custom fabricated, and they run much longer than the off-the-shelf ones that you can get from Rocky Road Outfitters, which, as far as I know, are the only bolt-on ones that you can get. We will be selling side rails, metal side rails at LusoOverland.com. I'm making this video in early December 2023, and in about probably like first quarter of 2024, we will have metal side rails at LusoOverland.com, but I'm not going to call them rock sliders. Like, they're not made out of a tough enough steel, and they'll be stronger than the factory plastic side steps, but not strong enough for me to call them rock sliders. Also, the thing that I want to point out, regardless if it's these, the ones we'll be selling at Luso Overland, or the ones that Rocky Road Outfitter sells, they are bolt-on, and they bolt on to the existing mounts that the plastic running boards bolted onto. There's 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. And if you're gonna actually be coming down on rocks, and they allow for some flex and some movement, and I've come down on some big boulders, and it's actually pushed the slider up and kind of smacked the bottom of that cladding. So if you are really going to be like taking on the Rubicon, you're going to be sliding on multiple boulders with the full weight of your vehicle, then you're gonna have to do some custom fab work. You're gonna need to run some legs further back off of the rear part of the slider. And it's tough because this being a third generation Montero, it's a monocoque body. You've got many layers of sheet metal to weld to. You don't have like a standard, thick chassis like ladder frame to weld to. So it's definitely more challenging. It can be done. There are guys out there that have done it and who do the Sierras every year, but it's more involved. Underneath for armor, you can see starting just behind the bumper, I'm running the full set of Booz bash plates. And so there's a front, an oil pan, a transmission. Then there is, I'll come around, and there's a, there's a transfer case, a fuel tank, and a rear AC. What we're looking at there is the back of the oil pan skid. This is the transmission skid. Then there's the transfer case skid. You can see the fuel tank skid behind there. That's the biggest one. It's about 5 feet long. And I think that's really important because the fuel tank is the lowest hanging part on my vehicle. And right next to it is that carbon fiber drive shaft. So having that skid there, I think, adds a little bit of protection on that. And there is the rear HVAC skid plate. You can see where we are. There's the back of the fuel tank skid. You can see the transfer case skid and the transmission skid. I'm also going to include this OEM tow hitch in the armor section because when you do come down on something, this protects your vehicle, you know, it being solid steel. I've definitely smacked that hitch a few times. Or if like you're out in Moab and you're going up these really steep inclines, you will drag this sometimes. And I like having that back here so as not to do any damage to the body or to the underside of the cargo box storage area in the cargo area. But I mean, I do tow with this vehicle also, but I'm going to put this down as armor in this section. And you can see the OEM hitch is really the best one. You can see it sits as high as you can get right up against the rear bumper. And most importantly, it ties in on the ends up here with horizontal bolts that go through all the way through the chassis. It doesn't just have some short bolts that bolt up into the chassis. It's always got these really big, like 5-6 inch long bolts that go through it on both sides. And that's what you need in order for this to be snatch proof. If you try snatching with like an aftermarket hitch and it doesn't have those horizontal bolts that go through the frame, you can just rip it right out of the body. And so that's not good. So if you're gonna, you know, have kinetic recoveries, like snatch recoveries, then you really need to either have the OEM one, which is super hard to find. You have to search junkyards, or you can check out Lamps and Fabworks. They make a snatch safe one. And I should mention that everything that I talk about in this video, if there's a link that can be posted, I will post to it of all the products. So anything that crosses my mind, I'll link to in the description. For tires, I'm running 285/70 R17. That's about a 33 by 11 inch tire. So that's a size that is really popular on a Gen 3 Montero with a suspension lift. Some guys have gone up bigger than that, like 285/75, for example, which is more like a 34. But you do start running into more clearance issues. And so this is kind of the biggest that I could ever see myself going on a Gen 3 Montero. I've had Gen 3s with 35s on there, and it starts to get into too much work and just bigger cost than benefit, in my opinion. So I really like the size 33. I would even consider just going with a 32. A lot less issues with a 32 even when it comes to like rubbing and things like that. Now, the biggest factor in rubbing is going to be your wheel selection. If you stay with the factory wheels, then you'll have very little issues. If you start to push them out further, like I've done, these are TRD off-road or TRD trail. I don't know the exact name of this wheel model, but you can find them, I believe, on 2015 and up 4Runners, and also some older FJ Cruisers had them, although the colors were different. I don't think they had the black inlays. They were just all aluminum, polished aluminum. And then what I've done is I've put some vinyl decals on the spokes to just be less blingy. Like it was just too much silver for me. And so then, of course, in the center, I've replaced the Toyota logo with a Mitsubishi logo center cap. And then, of course, you know, another polarizing thing here is the wheel lock on there. But speaking of polarizing KO2s, that's what these are. These are BF Goodrich KO2 all-terrains. I've had these on for 4 or 5 years, around 30,000 miles. They've got 30 seconds of tread left, and I can definitely notice a loss in traction compared to when, you know, they were new and had like whatever it was, 13, 14, I forget the exact tread depth. But yeah, last winter at this tread height, like I was definitely, it's like skidding or sliding more than I ever had before and more than I liked. on icy roads, and we had a really bad winter last year. And so I wish that that was a little better, but when they were newer and had much more tread, that was never an issue. They were amazing in the winter. I don't want to turn this video into like a big tire debate, but KO2s are very polarizing. Some people love them, other people think they're overrated. I fall into the camp of I like them. I've been very happy with these tires. I've never had a single puncture in KO2s. I've run them not just on this vehicle, but previous Monteros. I've run them in all kinds of terrain. As you can see, they are Load C. I'm a big fan of Load C tires on a Montero. A Montero is not an F350. It doesn't weigh 4 tons. Like, these tires have more than enough load capacity for your Gen 3 Montero, fully loaded to the gills, towing a camper. It doesn't matter. These tires are going to have more than enough capacity for your vehicle. Load C is where it's at. The tires air down, widen out so much better than Load E. They ride so much nicer than Load E on the streets over all those little bumps. You don't have to inflate them to some crazy PSI. I typically run mine at like 32 to 35 on the city streets. I'm happy with them, and I particularly like the weight. But the reason why I can't see myself ever going away from the KO2s is because you can get them for so cheap. When Jeep JLs, guys will buy one of those, the first thing they'll do is they'll go and want to put 35s or 37s on there. So you can pick these up for so cheap on like Craigslist and other classified sites. I think some new Broncos come with them as well. So getting this size, a 285/70/17, is just so easy to do, like so cheap to get a full set of 5. You know, you can get them for like $800 or something like that for like brand new tires. So I just can't see myself getting away from them, and I've been happy with them. All right, here's the spare tire. Nothing too exciting. I've just got like a little mount there for my mountain bike rack. And then sometimes I throw a trasharoo on here for when I'm going out camping, which is a super handy piece of kit to be able to just throw all your trash or your firewood back there. But the only things I want to point out here on the spare is, number one, I've done a very bad job of incorporating the spare into tire rotations. This tread is fantastic, so I got to do a better job in the future. That'll last, make my tires last much longer if I incorporate the spare into the tire rotations and do 5 tire rotations. And then the other thing I want to point out is that my TPMS does work in this vehicle. I got all new sensors. I went with the Ready Sensor brand. It's a Continental product. But here's the thing. Finding a sensor for a 3rd gen Montero's TPMS, that's not that hard. The hard part is getting it reprogrammed. The only place that you can get them reprogrammed is at a Mitsubishi dealer. I have not found any other scan tool on the market. Doesn't matter what tire shop you go to. I've never found one that can communicate with the Mitsubishi Montero's TPMS system. So you got to go to the dealer to get that reprogrammed. Dealer down in Phoenix charged me, I think it was like $80 to $100, somewhere in that range. It takes them 5 minutes. So if your dealer's trying to charge you like $200-300, I mean, it's literally like 5 minutes to connect to the vehicle and reset the TPMS sensors. But that is the key. If you've got that annoying blinking light on the dash and you've got new sensors, you, number one, have to have 5 new sensors, because the spare takes 1, and you need to have your spare tire sensor in this 1 o'clock position. There's even a little sticker right here on the door that tells you that. And then you need to take it to a Mitsubishi dealer. The other thing that I want to talk about the spare is getting a 33-inch tire to fit back here. 32 can fit on the factory mount, but then it starts to like hit the bumper if you go bigger than that with like a 33. As you can see here, I've got space and my tire sits a little further out. I think I could do definitely a 34, maybe a 35, and the solution is with this aftermarket plate. It bolts up to the tire carrier and raises up the mounts by about 1 inch. You can see here, instead of this hole being there, it raised it up. So that's the amount of lift that you get. It's about an 1.5 to 2 inches. And then it also pushes the tire out by the thickness of the plate, which is about 1/2 inch. Looking at Lovell's HD coil springs, I've got HD all around, extra raised height. If they look a little funny, it's because they're coated in lanolin oil to help rust proof them. So that's why they're kind of shiny and off colored. But yeah, levels HD springs all around. Inside are Bilstein 4600s, and that's it for suspension. The Bilsteins, I've been very happy with them. I've had them on the entire life of this vehicle since I've had it, 4 or 5 years, and they've done really well. I've been really impressed by them. I think they are the best value in upgraded shocks that you can get. What I've done is I've moved the circlip on the spring perch up to its upper position. You can see the lower position there. So I'm on the upper position, and the reason for that is because I am overloaded on the front than what the Levels HD springs are rated for, with all of this added weight up here. And so I was not getting 2 inches of lift. I was getting closer to 1 inch. I think it was like 1.25 inches. So by moving that circlip up, you're basically doing a preload spacer lift, and so that gives you back about 3/4 inch of lift. And by moving that circlip up, and I didn't notice any increase in firmness or stiffness in the ride. You will most likely if you do that and you don't have a ton of weight on the front end, but because I do have all that weight, I didn't notice any kind of change. And I actually prefer how the suspension rebounds on the front end now than before. But I am going to be trying out something new here. I think I'm going to be going with some conies because I still need more force, more rebounding force because of the massive amount of weight and thus force that the front end has. So when it comes down, I need something to arrest it faster, quicker, however you want to phrase it. And like I said, I've been super happy with the Bilsteins, but I think they're just overmatched with this amount of weight, and so I need to try some conies and see how that goes. In the rear, again, Levels HD Bilstein 4600s like we talked about, and then I've got the Polytough lower coil pad right there, which is a must. The OEM rubber ones just get destroyed in no time. Everything else is factory. You can see I've got, factory like OEM, inner and outer tie rods, upper and lower control arms. My CV boots are staying strong. I've still got my factory CVs. I highly recommend you do whatever it takes to keep your factory CV joints. They're way stronger than any of the aftermarket ones. So, if you get a tear in your boots, get that repaired quickly. Don't let a bunch of dirt and grime get in there and ruin the joint. Get it cleaned out, re-greased, rebooted, and you will be a happy camper because those factory CV joints are incredibly strong compared to the aftermarket ones. You can see I'm running a front sway bar. I'm also running a rear sway bar. There's not a lot of benefit to removing the sway bars on any Montero, but particularly a 3rd generation Montero. You get 1 extra inch of travel out of the front end if you remove that sway bar, and I just don't feel it's worth it for the downgrade in handling and stability that you'll get at highway speeds. I wouldn't be opposed to running without the rear sway bar, but the rear end has surprisingly a good amount of travel and articulation for an independent suspension vehicle, so I haven't really felt the need to do it. So being a Montero, it has a true center diff lock from the factory, and what I've done for the rear is have a Harrop E-locker installed right there. That's where my control switch is for it, and this is another thing that I'm a big fan of. If you're going to have a locker and you're going to have a switch in the cab, I think it's got to be something that's protected. You don't want to accidentally flip that, engage that when you're on the highway. It will explode that diff. So having it with a guard, I think, is, really important, especially if you have small kids that are always climbing up into your front seat and pushing all the buttons in your car. I've been very happy with the Harrop E-locker in the rear, and then of course the factory center diff lock, and that means the front end is open, and the traction control system in the Montero, in the 3rd generation Montero, is fantastic, and so I am totally happy with leaving the front open and relying on the traction control. There's no problems with keeping your factory traction control and having a mechanical diff lock in the rear. What's going to happen is the system, it applies the traction control when it detects wheel spin or slip, and so your rear wheels controls, they're just never going to slip once you're locked up. And so it's going to send, the only place it's going to use the traction control is in the front. And it works great. It's the best traction control system that I've ever used from a factory vehicle. It's as close as you can get to being triple locked without being triple locked. There are some areas where it does suck. Sometimes, like in really, really deep, soft sugar sand or powdery, like deep powdery snow, it can sometimes freak out. And if you're wondering, if you get into that situation and your traction control is making life harder on you and you want to disable it, the only way to disable it 100%, like 100% to where it doesn't do any braking, kill any throttle inputs, pulling a fuse in the engine bay will not do it 100%. Easiest way is to come down here and unplug a wheel speed sensor. So the front ones are super easy to get to. Just come here, unplug that. I like to keep like a Ziploc bag and rubber bands, a couple of those, just to cover up that exposed harness if I do that, so that crud doesn't get in there. And then that will completely kill it. You will have some warning lights on the dash. They will not go off after you reconnect that until after you've had a key cycle. You turn the car on, turn it off, then those warning lights will be gone. So a couple of quick things I'll say about the Harrop e-locker. You might find some videos if you're researching them where people talk about, oh, they don't like them because they can unlock and relock on their own, like if you roll backwards, and that's completely overblown. That was kind of a myth. Well, not necessarily a myth, but it started because of the original versions of the Harrop or Eaton e-lockers that were out on the market, but there's been a revised design out for a long time, like at least probably 7 years by this point. The one that I have is a revised design, and so I've never experienced any problems like that. It is true, it will unlock if you change direction. So if you're going forward and you're locked and then you start to roll backwards, it'll unlock, but it relocks incredibly quickly within like 1/8 of a wheel rotation. It's not something that I've ever found to be an issue. I've talked to a lot of Land Cruiser guys with the Eaton's e-lockers, which is the same locker. I think Harrop just makes it under a license in Australia. And no one's ever had an issue with it. It's completely overblown. But if you are getting a locker that is strictly going to be on like a rock crawling wig, then I can understand going with an air locker because it won't do that option. And you may not have 1/8 or 1/4 of a tire revolution where you are okay with the diff unlocking. I understand that. TRE 4x4, you know that we sell those lockers at LusoOverland.com. That wasn't really an option at the time that I built that part of this vehicle, and so that's why I went with Harrop. Nowadays, yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to go with a TRE 4x4 e-locker. They are a fraction of the price. The biggest difference is you will have more fitting, more work for your installer to do on the TRE. Like more things need to be bent or sanded. There's like these little tabs and things like that. There's just more shimming involved, more work to get them into spec than a Harrop or an ARB, for example. Now this vehicle has been re-geared. It's running 490s rather than the factory 430s that came with the limited trim of the Montero. 490s came on the XLS trim, and that makes a world of difference turning 33s. You know, you can get away with running the original gearing and having 33s, but especially if you're at sea level. But where I live at 7,000 feet, yeah, it's a big difference. And so I really, really love having 490s. I wouldn't want to have 33s without those deeper gears. The Winch is a Smitty-built X2O. 12,000 pound winch, which is a lot of winch for this vehicle, but remember, you only get that maximum 12,000 pounds on like the last wind of rope on the drum. And I was doing a lot more towing back then and traveling with people who had campers, and so I wanted to have a winch that if I had to pull an SUV with a camper attached that's stuck in the mud, like wanted to go as powerful as possible. And also I looked at the specs, and the 12,000 pounder didn't weigh any more than the 10,000 pounder, so I didn't really see a reason not to. So I've been happy with this winch. It's never let me down. I haven't used it a ton. I've maybe used it 4 or 5 times total. So it's been fine. Doesn't weigh very much, and which is nice because my front end on this vehicle already weighs a lot with the ARB bumper, the skids, everything else that I've got on here. I will point out that you will most likely want an offset fair lead. This one's by Factor 55. A bunch of companies out there make them, like Slee Off-Road, for example. And what that does is it moves the mouth of the fair lead up a little bit, because with the way that the ARB bumper is designed, if you're running a Haas fair lead and you don't have an offset fair lead like this, just a standard one, like the one that comes with the winch, your winch rope will actually rub on the top lip of the metal bumper, and so it'll tear through that over time. There's ways to address that. You can cut about 1/4 inch of steel out of your bumper, but the easiest way is just to go with an offset fair lead. You can see how I've done the control box mounting. I just took a piece of steel, cut it out. There's already holes in the bumper right here, so I just bolted that plate to the top, and then with some 3M dual lock, it's kind of like hardcore Velcro basically. I like this winch. It's wireless. You can run it wireless or wired. It comes with both options in the box. You know, it's sat outside for years, getting snowed on and frozen. Like, I've had to come in here and chip ice off of it to use it before. It's been good. I've been happy. I can still get to the release handle here. Plenty of room with that factory cutout in the ARB bumper. So that's that. I'm running like the little piece of protection that comes with it for like the final 3 feet of winch rope to protect that. And then this is something that I'm a big fan of too, is I recommend taking your winch hook and taking it up to the bumper if you have a steel bumper like this with hoops on it, rather than tying it into the front recovery point down there. Because one, you need your winch, chances are you're going to be buried, and so having to dig out your hook is no fun. And the other reason why is it'll limit the amount of dirt and debris and sticks and things that can scratch up your synthetic winch line and cause it to, you know, fail prematurely. Stuff's, you know, pretty sensitive to abrasive stuff like that, and so you want to protect it. So I'm a big fan of putting it up like that, and it's not going anywhere. Like, it's tucked in, it's solid, not moving. I don't have anything too fancy for lights, so you can see here I'm running the factory headlights, but these are the black bezel ones right here. This part here is black, whereas on an 03 to 06 it would normally be chrome. So I've swapped those out for the look of the black ones from a 2001 to 2002 Montero. I just like the look of them more. And then the only extra lights that I have, these ones I just got on here. These are aux beam 5-inch spotlights. And you might notice that I have quite a big gap between the factory headlight and the top of the bumper, and that is because I'm going to be mounting some really low profile light bars right here directly on the bumper at this angle, like this angle like that. So they will be my ditch lights, and if I get some really low profile ones like inch tall light bar right here, it'll still be below the beam of the headlamp. At least that's what I'm hoping for. I haven't done it yet, but that's my plan with why my bumper's mounted the way that it is. I don't really have anything to talk about with comms, because when I go off-roading with my buddies, we don't use like CBs or ham radios. We just have a cheap set of walkie-talkies that we use. But what I will talk about is this mod right here for the radio antenna. It's a standard whip, and it comes from the XLS trim of the 3rd generation Montero. And I really like this mod because the limited version's got a telescoping radio antenna, and if you had that thing out when you were off-roading and it caught just a little tree branch, it would get bent, and then when it went to go telescope back in, it would get all messed up. For towing, we already talked about my tow hitch. It's the OEM. It's the 3rd generation Montero has a 5,000 pound tow capacity. And then what I've had done back here is U-Haul installed this for me, and it's a 7-way you know, hitch controller, and it's just riveted directly to the rear bumper. There's my brake controller. That's the position I put it in. I felt that it was most out of the way. I'm tall and I have long legs, and so mounting it under the kick panel like most people do, I didn't want to take away any leg room. So it's a Concha Primus brake controller. It's fine, and having it here, I can see it easily. I can get to this button here when I'm driving with one hand, so I can use all the controls. Maintenance is the name of the game under here. I don't have a ton of modifications, just a few to share with you. First up, we've got the X2 Power battery. This is like a dual purpose, deep cycle and starting battery. It's a beast, it's awesome. I've upgraded to a Group 27F size rather than the factory Group 24, just for some extra power because of the winch. I don't really have any accessories inside, like a fridge or anything like that uses a lot of power. It's really just the winch that I wanted this battery for. And you can see this thing is insane. 930 cold cranking amp, 195 on the reserve capacity. I think it's like a 4 or 5 year warranty. It's awesome battery, and you can fit, in case you're wondering, you can fit a Group 31 battery in here. If you remove like this plastic battery tray and it sits directly on the bottom tray, you can fit a Group 31. On this side, that's where the circuit breakers are like set up for the tow hitch controller. Up here, I've got a custom fuse and relay boxes made by Concourse Specialties. I think nowadays there's cheaper, easier ways to do this with like switch pod type designs. And you can get like generic ones on Amazon, and that's probably what I would do if I had to do it all over again, but that didn't really exist, I don't think, at the time, or it wasn't nearly as, I didn't know about it at least. Anyways, so these are waterproof, and inside they've got relays. This one's got 6 relays and 6 fuses, so 6 fused relays. This one has got 2 relays and 6 fuse circuits, so 3 per each relay. And they've also got, each one has its own color-coded wiring. See all this extra wiring? So if I want to add some new accessory like off-road lights, I can just grab one of these wires and run it to the accessory, like run it to the light bar, say on the white wire. And then going into the cab is this wire harness with corresponding colors of wires and a thinner gauge that I'll use for the switch to control that accessory. So it makes it much easier to add accessories in the future. So it was a little bit more challenging to put those relay boxes in that small corner rather than just utilize all of this space, but I did want to leave this open in case one day I wanted to have an auxiliary battery, then that's probably where I would put it. So I just wanted to give myself the flexibility and leave this space open. All right, on the roof, very basic as you guys can see, and that's kind of the theme for the whole vehicle. I don't like to add a lot more than I think I'm gonna need or use, and I like to keep weight down. So all we have up here, some Yakima lowrider crossbars on the factory rails. You can't put a ton of weight on there. I think it's like 110 or 200 absolute max. I've seen guys put more than that. I've seen guys with rooftop tents on the factory crossbars and they've been okay, but they are plastic, and so I don't plan on doing that. I like ground tents anyways. Like a little Coleman ground tent is the way I like to go because it sets up quick and it costs 50 bucks. Yeah, so those, you know, they can come in handy for throwing like a kayak up here, a ladder. I've got a storage box, Yakima like small rooftop box that goes up there. That's why they're spaced the way they are, is for that, and that helps out a lot with adding a bunch more storage. And then up here I've got a factory, this is an OEM option. Dealer installed is typically what would have happened back in the day when these vehicles were new, this sunroof visor. And I love this thing because it completely gets rid of sunroof noise. So when you have your sunroof open, it's pretty loud inside the vehicle, but this thing right here cuts it down to where there's almost no noise at all, and it makes having the sunroof open actually enjoyable. And these things are long since discontinued. The only place you're going to get one is out of a junkyard. They are hard to find. They do fetch a pretty penny, so if you do find one, definitely snatch it. You can see I'm not much for a sticker game. I've just got a few. Of course, I got Luso Overland up there, and then I'm from PHQ. I've got a new gloss black Montero badge, a new limited badge as well, an underrated platform sticker from the Montero Collective, my Booze Bash Plate sticker on the front skid, and last but not least, the Rising Sun and Yoshi sticker at the front.